Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really happy for you to get to know today Dori Lewis. So, welcome, Dori.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Yeah, so Dori is kind of her expertise is in the use of psychedelics and that sort of thing. But as I start with everyone, Dori, tell folks a little more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado. I've been practicing as a therapist since I think 2013. I originally did not start in the psychedelic space. I started working in community mental health work in New York, working in therapeutic foster care and outpatient mental health services in Brooklyn, and really loved doing that work, loved the community-based work that I was doing that for about 4 years, moved out to Colorado and started to work for other folks in private practice and got my feet wet in working in that space. And then eventually opened up my own private practice in 2018 called Reflective Healing. The intention was not to do psychedelic work, it was really to do transpersonal, which is like kind of psychospiritual talk therapy with women and sex therapy work. And then it kind of slowly became its own being, as I think our creations often do. And I started to get into ketamine work through a few clients of mine who were utilizing it in the community. And then I was trained officially, and then I started teaching at trainings, teaching about set and setting and ethics and cultural appropriation in psychedelic spaces. And it kind of just grew from there. It's been its own organic evolution.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love hearing people's stories and just how they kind of go along this path, and in our therapeutic work. I think all of us, I think back when I first started in into the therapy world and that sort of thing is totally different place now than I was then back in the day when I was working for an agency. So I mean it's just neat to hear how it evolves. So I know one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording was just maybe some of the myths around the use of psychedelics and mushrooms and that sort of thing. And one of the things that you said that just kind of stuck out for me was just that particularly mushrooms are not a good use, not necessarily a good indication for trauma. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, so tell us what you know about all of that and what you've learned.
Absolutely. So, like I said, not all psychedelics are created equal, right? They're all really different. And when we say psychedelics, that's such a large term. What is that? What are we talking about, right? Are we talking about ketamine? Are we talking about MDMA? Are we talking about LSD, right? These are LSD is like your classic psychedelics, so are mushrooms.
Hmm.
So when I think about psychedelics, my practice has involved three psychedelics in particular. I've worked with ketamine. I worked with MDMA on the research study with MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Institute for Psychedelic Studies, during the crossover study. And then I've been now working with mushrooms for the last 7+ years as a facilitator. So I spent a lot of time in the underground, that's what we call it, before it was legal, when some of us were we knew that mushrooms were helpful and we kind of said, well, we're going to do it anyway. So we did it.
Hmm.
So I've had experiences with these three medicines in particular. I can't really speak to LSD or DMT because I personally haven't facilitated those spaces, although I have done those medicines personally. So when I'm thinking about mushrooms in particular and your comments about trauma, it's not that mushrooms are totally not useful for trauma. It's just it wouldn't be my like first line of defense for somebody coming in and saying, I've done everything I can. There's no medications that work. I have PTSD, you know, please help me. I think mushrooms are going to help. I would say, okay, let's pause and let's talk about a lot of factors because, as we know, PTSD is a pretty broad term. Is it complex PTSD? Was it a single incident? Was it, early childhood attachment trauma that resulted in PTSD symptoms? What symptoms do you have right now? How do they look? How do they impact your life, your relationships, all those factors? And so, if somebody has never really delved into their trauma, if they really haven't had an opportunity to develop a trusting relationship with the therapist that they're going to be working with, if they've really never understood the impact of the trauma on their somatic body, I wouldn't do mushrooms initially. It might be something we would do down the road after a good therapeutic relationship was built, after they've practiced some somatic work, after some of their symptoms have been well managed by other skills. Maybe EMDR has been utilized, maybe narrative exposure therapy, maybe they've done some attachment work with a therapist. And then it might be appropriate to introduce mushrooms at a later date. But if somebody reached out and said, I have PTSD and my symptoms are really intense and I have a lot of anxiety, I have a lot of flashbacks, I'm really activated in relationship and in life, and I'm having a hard time functioning, I certainly would not say, here, let's do a mushroom session next week.
Hmm. Sure, sure. One of the things that I think about when we think about psychedelics and particularly mushrooms and things like that, there's probably a lot of stigma for a lot of therapists that they have around that. Do you want to say something that might maybe say some things about that and just how it's helpful and maybe kind of maybe some of the science behind how it works? That's a
You
broad
know,
question, I know.
that for therapists who are hesitant, that makes a lot of sense. This is kind of it's a kind of a popular time to be talking about psychedelics, and they've become quite fashionable. I think they're not for everybody. They're not for every therapist, and they're not like to facilitate, and they're not for every client. And so it's not always like, yes, psychedelics are going to cure everything. I really want to add a little bit more nuance to this conversation. I'm not one of those psychedelic providers who's like psychedelics for all. This is going to help everybody. So I think that it's good to have a tempered approach to, listen, this is for some clients at a certain stage of their work, just like any other tool that we would use as providers. If we can, as therapists, broaden our understanding that psychedelics are simply a tool. They are a tool like EMDR is a tool, like IFS skills are a tool, like somatic practices are a tool, like certain types of meditation are a tool. You know, if we can apply psychedelics to that kind of menu of options of tools, just as a therapist doesn't have to love or even believe that maybe certain modalities are super helpful, it's the same with psychedelics. It's not a panacea. It's not going to help everybody and anybody, and it's not always appropriate. But if we can understand the nuance of there are certain times with certain folks where this would be really well applied, wonderful. And can we be collaborative with other providers if we ourselves don't want to offer it, but we have a sense that maybe our clients are curious? This is the other piece about psychedelic therapy, it's client led. So if a client comes to you and says, I'm really curious about this, it's our job to be curious and to encourage them to explore, okay, how can I support you in providing resources for this curiosity? Because this is something that you can access. And even if you're in a state where mushrooms aren't legal, you're still probably in a state where ketamine is legal because ketamine is it's being it's federally accepted and used because it's being used off label. So,
Hmm.
even if you're in a state where, it's not legal to use mushrooms, you probably can connect somebody to someone who has experience with ketamine. And so
Hmm.
it's our responsibility to support our clients in their curiosity and to have another professional and collaborate with them and say, talk to this person. I really actually don't know about it. Or sometimes it's
Hmm.
our job to educate ourselves about it.
Right.
I wish I could say more about the science in terms of what we know, especially with mushrooms, the psilocybin mushrooms, and how they work on the brain. I'm not the person that knows. There's a lot of people that have a ton of knowledge about the psychopharmacology and the neurobiology of how psychedelics work on the brain, specifically mushrooms. I'm not that person, so I'm not going to speak to that piece, but I will say that I personally have seen it really help a lot of people, but I've also seen it happen and people don't really know what to make of it, and it's not necessarily the most helpful for them. It's like I said, it's not this like golden cure all, but for the right
Hmm.
people at the right time, I've seen it do incredible, incredible things in a way that psychotherapy just was not able to touch alone and in and of itself.
Right. Right. Can you maybe give some examples of that? I mean, just that kind of the
Yeah.
successes you've seen and why you think it made a big difference.
In my experience, my clients have worked with me for sometimes many years or months before we introduce psychedelics. I've had clients who, after maybe a few years of talk therapy, they've said, I think I'm ready for something. Like, I know that you do this, so I'd like to try it. Especially like with ketamine, I've seen a lot of benefit to folks who have ruminating thoughts, this type of depression that's just constant negative thinking over and over about the self, and it's hard to get up in the morning, and I can't really get out of this kind of, a friend of mine, Dr. Craig Heacock, calls it like black bear depression, like it almost like looks like seasonal affective disorder. Ketamine is
Hmm.
incredibly helpful for that. I've seen there are folks who are kind of in that malaise, and we give them, 3 or 4 ketamine journeys, and they are like markedly different. They are motivated, they are waking up and greeting the day, they have energy, they're no longer having that ruminating thoughts. They make healthy choices that end up leading to a better experience and better mood.
Hmm.
So that's been really great to see with ketamine. And then with mushrooms, I've seen folks who are going through or have maybe lost a parent many years ago and come in and we're doing other types of work. And in the mushroom journey, they're able to connect with and access that grief in a really profound way where they're able to actually metabolize it. I think oftentimes our emotions are mental concepts and we have a hard time somatically processing them and really emoting from those
Hmm.
feelings. And I have found that mushrooms can help people access those emotions
Hmm.
in a somatic and felt sense and actually metabolize and process the loss or the grief that has been more of just kind of a vague concept swirling around them. And they
Hmm.
can really feel it and move through it and get to a new stage of peace in whatever that loss or grief was. That's just an example of how some people have used
Right, right.
mushrooms
I
and
love
ketamine.
I love that. I love the way that you use the word metabolize. I've never thought about it in that way. And that's just having gone through kind of my, as people that are listeners to this podcast know, just kind of my grief journey with having lost my wife a couple of years ago, or and just that that met that met, the word metabolize just really resonates. And so yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah. So, Dory, what are really kind of, you think about psilocybin and mushrooms and ketamine. What are the big differences between the two? I mean, ketamine I think of as a manufactured substance. I might be wrong about that versus, the mushrooms that are not. So,
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, ketamine is often made at a compounding pharmacy, and so it's a dissociative. We call it kind of like the cousin of a psychedelic because it in and of itself is not technically a psychedelic, it's a dissociative. So ketamine at high doses is used in the emergency room. When somebody breaks an arm and they need to set it, they'll give you ketamine because a high dose of ketamine, it's going to make you like knock you out. World Health Organization actually names ketamine as one of its essential drugs because it's incredibly safe and it works really well. So it real at high doses cause you to, it can be an anesthetic, but at low doses, and what I use in my practice, which I use oral ketamine because my clients can go pick that up at the compounding pharmacy and bring their prescription in, and then they take it in my office as I am there supporting them through the experience. One of the benefits of ketamine is it is brief. So, a mushroom experience can be 5+ hours. A ketamine experience can be about 30 to 60 to 90 minutes when you're doing it oral. So there's a huge benefit and a cost benefit to doing ketamine. I often
hmm.
explain, and I was on a podcast back from the abyss not too long ago, where I talked about why I often use ketamine first before I introduce someone to psilocybin mushrooms. But ketamine, like I said, is a dissociative. If you take it at a lower dose, you're going to have this dreamlike state where you're not anesthetized. You're slightly dissociated, depending on how much you've taken or, how sensitive you are. You're slightly or more dissociated. And in that dissociated state, the default mode brain network like quiets down. It's the part of our brain that like is making lists and is thinking about what am I making for dinner tonight and how many times do I have to walk the dog this week and those kinds of things. And it kind of quiets that down and it allows a more insightful, a more calm, maybe wise part of the mind to kind of gently float to the surface and offer information, maybe even visions, visual hallucinations or a sense of physical peace and calm where the nervous system gets to experience that. Maybe images or thoughts kind of float in and out of the mind that provide information and insight into how this person maybe wants to operate differently in their lives or insights that are helpful for them to understand. I've had clients come in and, they're at the end of their experience, they're saying, okay, it's okay for me to be calm.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for me to rest. That's what my inner heal. We use this word, the inner healing intelligence. And I think
Mm-hmm.
all people have this. You don't just have to do psychedelics to have an inner
Right.
healing intelligence.
Right.
Inner healing intelligence is the part of our psyche or higher self, or maybe some people might say they're spiritual guides. Everyone has different language for it. IFS might say the self with a capital S. But when we access that part of ourselves, that part knows what we need to heal. It knows what we
Mm-hmm.
need to be a whole being. And when we get into contact with that part, we're able to listen to that guidance and follow it as
Mm-hmm.
much as possible. And when we come back to the light of day, so to speak, or the sober mind.
Right. Right.
I think both ketamine and mushrooms give us access to this inner healing intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in different ways. You asked about the difference with mushrooms. And so mushrooms are going to be longer experiences. You are less dissociated. So with ketamine, you need to help somebody go to the bathroom. Like their legs might not work. They might be not able to stand. Their body might feel really heavy. They might not be able to sense your fingers or your feet or that even you even have a body. With mushrooms, that's not probably likely, although unless you do an incredibly, like what we call a hero's dose, then you might actually have that physical dissociation.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, with the clients that we're working with in psychotherapy, folks should be physically totally online. They should be able to open their eyes, to get up, to move, to walk without much hindrance. So it's not dissociative. It is more hallucinogenic at times, although not always. Mushrooms can also be really somatic, could be
Mm-hmm.
very, very body centered. In fact, someone's whole journey might just be about experiencing different sensations in their body and moving from
Mm-hmm.
that place. They could also be having a lot of visual hallucinations, seeing sacred geometry or having visions as if you're kind of being shown parts of your life and you're getting kind of a review of what's been going on lately and how to relate to that. Some people in mushroom journeys might experience connection with ancestors, past loved ones, and feel like they're connecting with higher beings, or there's a big spiritual component to
Mm-hmm.
psilocybin mushrooms. And I think that also adds to the complexity and the beauty of working with mushrooms.
Right, right. Well, I know there's a lot of kind of ancient wisdom, and I mean, just I think immediately of Native American, indigenous cultures, and the use of psilocybin and that sort of thing, and how important that was for their whole spiritual life, and just that connection. But yeah, it's this is just fascinating, and I think kind of the take home for me with all of this is that I think one of the things that's just indicative of therapy in general is getting people to think about themselves and their situation and their world and their experience in different ways. And so the use of psychedelics is just like you said before, Dori, is just a tool to help with that. And that if we can experience something in a different way, that creates a huge change for people.
Absolutely. Yes, it
Yeah.
can. And good integration is a really big part of psychedelic therapy. Being
Hmm.
able to help somebody in the meaning making process. A journey in and of itself is can be profound, but it's usually not enough to really make the changes. People, I think, are often coming to me in my practice and wanting, like, they want this immediate change. I'm going to do mushrooms and then all this stuff is going to shift. That's like pretty unlikely. What's
Hmm.
most likely to happen is you're going to have an experience with this medicine, and then you're going to go back to your life, and nothing's really going
Hmm.
to change.
Right.
Unless you choose to take the information from your experience and try to weave the wisdom and the information and the suggestions and the insights into your daily life so your daily life starts to look and feel different. But that's a two-person that's a team effort, meaning that that's you as the journeyer, the mushrooms, and maybe your, facilitation guide, your integration coach, whoever it is you're working with, or, you could do it yourself without that third person. But this is collaborative. I think we have to shift our perspective of what healing is in the Western world. It's not you take this thing and then the changes get made and your symptoms are gone. That's not how mushrooms work. Mushrooms require participation from the person who does the medicine. And we, as psychedelic providers, have a responsibility to educate people on the responsibility that they have as the journeyer, and that this is not just going to change their minds and change their lives because they do mushrooms. It will take work and commitment to change and to the process of integration in order to really see their lives change.
Right. Right. Wow, this is great stuff, Dory, and I've got to be mindful of your time and all of that. But maybe real quickly before we kind of wrap things up, what sort of ethical considerations would you want people to know about?
Yes, and I would like to add a little piece at the end of this if people
Hmm.
are interested in becoming psychedelic therapists.
Yes,
If I
definitely,
Yeah,
definitely,
we'll add
yes.
a piece at the end. So, sorry, would you repeat your question?
Yeah, yeah, just some of the ethical considerations
Yes,
that
yes.
that come to mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot, right? People are in altered states. There's a huge power dynamic because we already have a power dynamic in therapy, right? You've got the therapist, and this person is coming to you and saying, "Help me, please, I think you have answers that I don't." And with psychedelics, this power dynamic is even more weighted. We've got this person who's giving you this powerful psychedelic, spiritual at times medicine that gives you access to these powerful journeys and information and insight and connection to a higher or a more expanded consciousness. And it's very easy for a therapist or a facilitator to take advantage of that power dynamic without even knowing it. I have a whole course. I mean, I teach on psychedelic ethics, so there's that power dynamic creates a lot of opportunity for the vulnerable client to be taken advantage of, either
Hmm.
intentionally or unintentionally, by the provider. So
Hmm.
that's something to consider. The other ethics is that clients are more susceptible to wanting touch or connection with the provider and seeing the provider as like the guru or the spiritual teacher. And so that adds to this power dynamic and the ethics that need to be considered when we're holding
Hmm.
space, not just around how we hold space, but like types of touch that are used in psychedelic spaces, and even how we communicate. It's never our jobs to interpret somebody's experience for them. And it's very easy as a therapist to try to get into therapist mode and to start helping someone make meaning and offering insights and solutions and ideas. That's actually not our job in psychedelic work. And so therapists have a lot of unlearning to do if they do choose to be facilitators in psychedelic work. There is a lot that is markedly different than our role as therapists that needs to be unlearned or considered when shifting your role as a therapist to a psychedelic facilitator. And those are
Right.
different roles.
Right, right. Well, Dory, tell folks a little bit more about how, if they're interested in this, how they can connect with you and things that you've got for people.
So I am the co-founder of Elemental Psychedelics, and that is a Colorado approved training center for licensed facilitation for mushroom facilitation in the state of Colorado. So if people are interested in applying, we do have a fall cohort that we're currently accepting applications for. We are one of the smaller programs in Colorado, so we keep our cohorts at about 25 to 30 people. And we do have, it's a hybrid program. So many programs are mostly online with a few in persons. I would say we are about 50-50. We have a fair amount of in-person hours and we also have virtual hours. So our program is small. It is intimate, and we also do try to bridge the kind of Western clinical framework with more indigenous and spiritual practices so that we are kind of creating this bridge between these two worlds because this medicine is also a bridge. I will say, if you are interested in applying to elemental psychedelics, you have to have experience with mushrooms. And I want to say this, if you're interested in doing psychedelic therapy, try psychedelics first. Try medicine, try mushrooms, try ketamine, have your own experiences. Those are the first teachers that should be teaching you about this work, is your
Hmm.
own experiences with these substances and these medicines and these plants and these fungi. It should be, those are your first teachers. And then once you've
Hmm.
had your own experiences, exploring programs and finding out what is your orientation to this work based on your own experiences.
Right, right. Yeah, so the conventional wisdom of as therapists, we need to do our own work.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Which people hear that from me all the time. Well,
Oh, good. I'm glad
well,
we're on the
well,
same page.
Dory, yeah. So Dory, tell folks a little bit about where they can go to find you, websites, that kind of thing.
So I also am the founder of Reflective Healing. So you can find me at reflectivehealing.com. I offer consultation and supervision to other therapists and licensing for LPCs in the state of Colorado as well. And you can reach out to me on that website and just hit the contact us button. And you can also, if you want to train with me at Elemental Psychedelics with Dr. Shannon Hughes, my co-founder, you can find us at elementalpsychedelics.com. We do not have any in social media. We have chosen not to engage in social media personally and professionally, but reflectivehealing.com or elementalpsychedelics.com. And just hit the contact us button and I will receive the email.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary for people to get to that easily. Well, Dory, I've really enjoyed our conversation, and this was really very enlightening for me and hopefully for our listeners as well. And hopefully we can connect again soon.